Pythagoras. The name probably brings to mind school geometry, but the man himself was far stranger. Born around 570 BCE on the island of Samos, he eventually moved to Croton in southern Italy, where he founded not just a school of math and philosophy, but something that looked a lot like a cult. His brotherhood lived communally under strict rules. Members took vows of secrecy, ate only vegetarian diets, and avoided beans, which they believed contained souls. Daily life was filled with rituals, silence at meals, purification ceremonies, and long periods of study. Above all, they treated numbers as sacred. For Pythagoras, reality itself was made of numbers, and understanding them meant tapping into the divine structure of the universe. His followers revered him almost as a semi-god, reporting miracles like healing powers or even that he had a golden thigh, proof of divinity. Breaking rules brought severe punishment, sometimes even expulsion or death. Outsiders viewed the brotherhood with suspicion, seeing it as shadowy and fanatical, and eventually the group was attacked and scattered. Despite the secrecy, Pythagoras' legacy endured. The Pythagorean theorem is only the tip of his influence. He helped shape Western ideas of harmony, mathematics, and the link between science and mysticism. Pythagoras shows how easily philosophy can blur into religion. What began as study of numbers turned into devotion, ritual, and near worship of the man who claimed numbers explained everything.
Plato, born in Athens around 427 BCE, is remembered as one of history's greatest philosophers, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle, and founder of the Academy. His dialogues shaped Western philosophy with themes of justice, virtue, and his famous theory of forms, the idea that the world we see is only a shadow of a higher eternal reality. But while Plato himself wasn't leading a cult, the centuries after his death saw his teachings morph into something much closer to religion. This movement became known as Neoplatonism. Thinkers like Plotinus, Iamblichus, and Proclus took Plato's idea of the One, the ultimate source of reality, and elevated it into a mystical object of worship. Neoplatonist schools weren't just classrooms. They were hierarchical sects with rituals of purification, meditation, and sometimes even theurgy, ritual acts meant to invoke divine powers and align the soul with the cosmos. Followers didn't just study Plato's texts, they treated him almost like a prophet, pointing towards spiritual salvation. His teachings became less a philosophy than a roadmap to transcendence. For centuries, Neoplatonism spread through the Roman Empire, deeply influencing Christian theology, medieval mysticism, and even Renaissance occultism. What began as Plato's rational search for truth transformed into traditions that blurred philosophy and faith, forging quasi-religious communities that lasted well over 1,000 years. Plato's ideas remind us that philosophy can outgrow the classroom. Under Neoplatonism, his vision of the One became not an idea to debate, but a godlike force to worship.
Diogenes of Sinope, born around 412 BCE, became the most notorious of the Cynic philosophers. Known as the Dog, he rejected every social norm of Athens to live a life stripped down to what he saw as pure nature. He threw away possessions, slept in a barrel, begged for food, and performed natural bodily functions in public with no shame. For Diogenes, philosophy wasn't about theories and polished schools, it was about shocking society into seeing how false its conventions really were. And he gained followers who treated him almost like a prophet of poverty. Cynics modeled his lifestyle, wearing rags, carrying staffs, mocking the powerful, and refusing comfort. To outsiders, the Cynics were more like a bizarre sect, dirty street preachers who prized humiliation as wisdom. One famous story claims Diogenes walked Athens with a lantern in daylight looking for an honest man. Another, when offered hospitality, he destroyed the furniture to show his contempt for luxury. His outrageous acts weren't just stunts, they were lessons. Though scorned as fanatics in their time, the Cynics influenced the later Stoics, who softened the edge into a more structured philosophy of virtue. But in raw form, Diogenes showed how rejection of all norms can look less like philosophy and more like a cult of radical defiance. Empedocles, born around 495 BCE in Sicily, was both philosopher and mystic, one of antiquity's strangest figures. He proposed a cosmology built on four roots: earth, air, fire, and water, combined and separated by the cosmic forces of love and strife. That alone placed him in philosophy's history books. But Empedocles wasn't content to be just a thinker. He claimed to be a divine being, part philosopher, part prophet, part magician. His followers believed he could command nature itself, halting plagues or controlling winds. Stories told that he performed healing miracles and was worshipped almost as a god. His sect practiced rituals that fused philosophical speculation with ecstatic religious devotion. Empedocles taught that souls were trapped in cycles of rebirth as punishment and could only be purified through following his teachings. His descriptions of himself as an immortal god, no longer mortal, turned philosophy into something closer to a mystery cult. The legends around his death sealed his mythic image. Some accounts claim he leapt into Mount Etna's volcano to prove his divinity, disappearing in flame. Later storytellers joked that the mountain spat back one of his bronze sandals, showing the philosopher god wasn't quite immortal after all. Empedocles' legacy reveals how easily philosophy blurred into prophecy. To his followers, he wasn't just explaining nature, he was transcending it, as if wielding divine power.
Epicurus, born in 341 BCE on the island of Samos, may be one of history's most misunderstood philosophers. Today, Epicurean suggests luxury and indulgence, but Epicurus himself preached a philosophy of modest pleasure and inner peace. He founded a community in Athens called the Garden. Unlike Plato's Academy or Aristotle's Lyceum, the Garden was private, communal, and set apart from public life. Men and women, free citizens and slaves, lived side by side, radical equality for the time. Their rules revolved around simple meals, frank conversations, and friendship as the highest good. The goal? Autoroxia, a state of tranquility free from fear of gods or death. Epicurus argued that the universe was made of atoms, the gods were distant and uninvolved, and death was nothing to fear. Quote, "When we exist, death is not. When death exists, we are not." From the outside, though, many Athenians saw the garden as suspicious, even cult-like. Whispered rumors painted it as a secret hedonism. In truth, it was disciplined. Members sought virtue through simplicity, not wild excess. Though mocked in his day, Epicurus's philosophy survived underground for centuries and later inspired Enlightenment rationalists, secular humanists, and even parts of modern science. His garden shows how philosophy, practiced in community, can look like a cult to outsiders, even when its real goal is peace.
Plotinus, born in Roman Egypt in 204 CE, became the towering figure of Neoplatonism, a movement that carried Plato's ideas into mystical and religious territory. He taught that ultimate reality was the one, beyond being and thought, an infinite source from which everything flows. The human soul, he said, had fallen into the material world, but through discipline, contemplation, and philosophical assent, it could reunite with that divine source. Plotinus founded a school in Rome where his charisma and presence drew followers who treated him not just as a teacher, but as a guide to salvation. Students lived communally, rehearsed exercises of moral purification, and studied under a hierarchy of initiation. These practices blurred lines between philosophy and spirituality until the Neoplatonist circle resembled a religious sect. Reports claim Plotinus himself reached ecstasy 4 times, uniting with the One. His disciples regarded this as near-divine proof of his teaching. Later figures, like Iamblichus, even more explicitly ritualized Neoplatonism, adding theurgy, sacred acts meant to summon gods. While Christianity eventually became the dominant faith of Rome, Neoplatonism left deep marks on theology, mysticism, and even Renaissance occultism. To its believers, Plotinus wasn't simply analyzing Plato, he was offering a path to transcendence. Plotinus's life shows how easily philosophy's search for truth can grow into a full spiritual cult, where the thinker becomes a prophet and the idea becomes salvation.
Giordano Bruno, born in 1548 in Nola, Italy, was a Dominican friar turned wandering philosopher, mystic, and magician. He rejected the rigid dogmas of the church, embracing instead a blend of Hermetism, astrology, and Copernican astronomy. Bruno argued something radical for his time. The universe was infinite, filled with countless worlds beyond Earth, all teeming with life. He claimed divinity permeated all of nature and the human soul itself could expand and unite with this cosmic infinity. These visions were not just ideas. He inspired tight circles of disciples who treated him like a prophet of a new cosmology. Bruno supplemented Platonic and Aristotelian reasoning with occult practices and magical ritual. His groups studied symbols, chants, and secret teachings that blurred the roles of philosopher and priest. To loyal followers, he seemed like a visionary, unlocking the hidden truths of the cosmos. To critics, he was a dangerous heretic, creating cult-like societies. The Catholic Inquisition ultimately condemned him on multiple charges, including heresy, blasphemy, and sorcery. In 1600, Bruno was burned at the stake in Rome, cementing his legend as a martyr for free thought. Bruno's legacy is dark and magnetic. To some, he was a scientist ahead of his time. To others, an occultist playing prophet. Either way, he left behind a picture of philosophy so infused with mysticism, it could inspire a whole secret order.
Helena Blavatsky, born in Ukraine in 1831, became one of the most influential and controversial spiritual leaders of the 19th century. World traveler, writer, and self-styled mystic, she co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875, a global movement that blurred the line between philosophy, religion, and cult. Blavatsky drew from Hinduism, Buddhism, Gnosticism, and Western esotericism to claim a hidden knowledge kept alive by ascended masters, mystical adepts guiding humanity from behind the scenes. Her major books, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, presented sprawling cosmologies that mixed Eastern metaphysics with occult science. The Theosophical Society quickly spread from New York to India and Europe. Members treated Blavatsky as a prophet, studying her teachings with ritualistic devotion. Centers sprang up where initiates practiced meditation, studied karma and reincarnation, and sought spiritual ascent. Outsiders accused the group of cult-like secrecy, especially when scandals broke about Blavatsky's supposed faked psychic phenomena. Yet her impact was enormous. Theosophy shaped the spread of Eastern philosophy in the West, influenced artists like Kandinsky, spiritual movements ranging from New Age to modern occultism, and even early ideas in ecology and holistic thought. Blavatsky embodied the fusion of philosophy and faith into a living sect. To supporters, she was a visionary teacher of hidden wisdom. To critics, the architect of one of modernity's most enduring cult-like movements.
George Gurdjieff, born in the Caucasus in 1866, was part philosopher, part mystic, part showman. He traveled widely through Central Asia and the Middle East, gathering esoteric traditions that he molded into what he called the Fourth Way, a system of self-awakening designed to transform ordinary people into fully conscious beings. Unlike other spiritual schools that demanded withdrawal into monasteries or ascetic life, Gurdjieff's Fourth Way insisted transformation could happen within daily life, but the process was brutal. His students endured harsh drills, long hours of meditation and movement exercises, and constant psychological pressure. Obedience to the master was paramount. Gurdjieff kept a charismatic, sometimes tyrannical presence. He stunned followers with paradoxical lectures, invented dances he called movements, and occasionally humiliated disciples to break their ego. His communes, first in France and later around the world, often looked from the outside like strange sects where initiates surrendered autonomy under his iron authority. Critics saw his methods as exploitation, but many students, including intellectuals and writers, swore by the transformative power of his teachings. After his death, Gurdjieff's ideas continued through successor schools, some of which are still active today, often attracting the same accusations of cult-like secrecy and hierarchy. Gurdjieff's message was about waking up to reality, but through his authoritarian style, he blurred the line between teacher and cult leader.
Ayn Rand, born in Russia in 1905, became one of the most polarizing figures in 20th century philosophy. After emigrating to America, she achieved literary fame with novels like The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, which championed rugged individualism, reason, and capitalism under the label objectivism. But Rand's philosophy wasn't confined to books. In mid-century New York, she built a devoted inner circle of students and admirers known informally as the Collective. Members studied objectivism line by line, adopted Rand's tastes in art and music, and treated her words as authoritative truth. Loyalty to Rand was absolute. Disagreement often meant excommunication. Her closest disciple, Nathaniel Branden, ran objectivist institutes that spread the philosophy with almost religious zeal. Meetings resembled both seminars and rituals, where followers dissected her doctrines with reverence. Critics, both inside and out, accused Rand of practicing the very collectivism she denounced, turning rational individualism into a form of groupthink. Despite the controversies, objectivism grew into a long-lasting intellectual movement, influencing business leaders, politicians, and cultural debates about capitalism and freedom. Rand remains a hero to some, a dogmatic cult leader to others. Rand's story captures one of philosophy's ironies, a thinker who exalted independent judgment but gathered a movement where independence often meant blind loyalty to her.
L. Ron Hubbard, born in Nebraska in 1911, started as a pulp science fiction writer before launching one of the most controversial intellectual movements of the modern era. In 1950, he published Dianetics, the modern science of mental health. He pitched it as a new philosophy of the mind, a therapy meant to free people from hidden engrams of trauma. From there, he founded Scientology, describing it at first as a system of self-improvement and later as a comprehensive worldview blending psychology, metaphysics, and cosmology. Followers practiced auditing sessions to clear themselves of spiritual impurities at high cost and under strict guidance. But Scientology's community quickly gained cult-like traits. Devotion to Hubbard was absolute, critics and defectors often faced harassment, secrecy surrounding higher teachings, and the organization developed elaborate hierarchies of initiation. Hubbard himself was venerated as a near prophet, leading from ships at sea to avoid legal scrutiny. Despite ongoing controversies, Scientology spread globally, drawing celebrities, wealth, and government battles. By his death in 1986, Hubbard had created not just a philosophy of mind, but one of the most infamous high-control institutions of the century. Hubbard's story shows the turning point where philosophy, self-help, and science fiction fused into a movement many see as a dangerous cult, yet one with enduring influence.
Sun Myung Moon, born in rural Korea in 1920, blended religion, politics, and philosophy to create the Unification Church, one of the most controversial new religious movements of the 20th century. Moon taught that traditional Christianity had failed and that he was the true father sent to complete Christ's mission. His philosophy centered on the idea of cosmic family harmony, marriages arranged to heal human sin and unify nations. His mass wedding ceremonies, sometimes with tens of thousands of couples, became global spectacles. Followers, called Moonies, devoted themselves completely, living communally, fundraising tirelessly, and treating Moon and his wife, Hak Ja Han, as near-divine parental figures. To critics, this was clear cult behavior, rigid loyalty, financial exploitation, and suppression of dissent. To supporters, it was a spiritual revolution destined to bring peace. Beyond religion, Moon built vast business networks, media outlets, and political connections, especially in the U.S. and South Korea. His reach extended into billions of dollars, shaping discourse well beyond the church pews.
When he died in 2012, millions of followers still regarded him as the messianic figure who would unify humanity. For the outside world, his legacy remains deeply divided. Visionary philosopher of cosmic family or leader of a manipulative cult. Moon's story captures the 20th century's uneasy line between spiritual philosophy and the machinery of cult devotion.
Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, later known as Osho, was born in India in 1931. A brilliant speaker, he mixed philosophy from Nietzsche, Zen Buddhism, Freud, and Hindu mysticism into a vision of radical personal freedom. He argued life should embrace love, creativity, and meditation, but without moral or social restraints. By the 1970s, Rajneesh began attracting a global following. In India and later in Oregon, USA, he built massive communes where thousands of saffron-robed devotees, called sannyasins, followed him with near religious devotion. The communes practiced intense meditation, therapy sessions, and a controversial openness about sexuality. But life in the movement was highly controlled. Followers turned over property, wore uniforms, and treated Osho like a living god. In Oregon, his group famously bought an entire town, Rajneeshpuram, sparking fierce conflict with locals. The commune collapsed after scandals involving mass poisoning, immigration fraud, and armed stockpiling, events that made global headlines. Rajneesh was deported from the U.S. in the 1980s, but remained influential until his death in 1990. Today, his books and talks still sell worldwide, reframed as spiritual self-help. To some, Osho was a revolutionary philosopher of freedom. To others, he led one of the most dangerous cult experiments of the 20th century.
Aleister Crowley, born in 1875 in England, called himself the Great Beast 666 and became one of the most notorious occult philosophers in modern history. Rejecting the strict Christianity of his childhood, he built a system he called Thelema, a philosophy of radical will and mystical law. The core of Thelema was his famous axiom, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Crowley framed it as a philosophy of self-realization, each person discovering their true will. But in practice, it developed into secret esoteric lodges with rituals, initiations, and devotion to Crowley himself. He experimented with drugs, sex magic, and occult ceremonies to open the doors of spiritual power. His followers created orders like the AAA and the Ordo Templi Orientis, which survived long after his death and functioned like cults, hierarchical, ritual-based, and centered on Crowley's writings. Vilified by tabloids as the wickedest man in the world, Crowley relished his villain image. His flamboyant persona helped cement a following that blended admiration, fear, and myth. Though he died obscure in 1947, Crowley's legacy exploded afterward, influencing modern paganism, counterculture movements, and even pop culture. Thelema endures today in numerous groups, proving how a philosophy of will can evolve into a global network of cult-like devotion.
Shoko Asahara, born in Japan in 1955, blended Buddhist teachings, Hindu cosmology, and apocalyptic philosophy into a doomsday group known as Aum Shinrikyo. Beginning in the 1980s as a yoga and meditation school, the group drew thousands of educated young Japanese who believed Asahara was both guru and messianic savior. Asahara preached that the end of the world was imminent, triggered by global conflict. Only his followers, he claimed, would be saved spiritually. Disciples underwent harsh initiation rituals, donated fortunes, and treated him as divine. The group built compounds stocked with weapons, chemicals, and even laboratories to develop biological agents. In 1995, Aum Shinrikyo carried out one of the most infamous terrorist attacks of the century, releasing sarin gas in the Tokyo subway system, killing 13 people and injuring thousands. The atrocity shocked Japan and the world, exposing how a seemingly philosophical and spiritual sect could spiral into lethal fanaticism.
Asahara was arrested, tried, and executed in 2018, along with several senior disciples. The group splintered, but remnants still exist under new names. Asahara's story is philosophy twisted into apocalypse. Abstract ideas of karma, liberation, and world renewal turned into justification for murder. It remains a chilling reminder that when philosophy turns cult and cult turns militant, human lives are the ultimate collateral.